first I was sick and then I had other things going on, so I didn't really have the time. But I'm back now with some more paranormal stories told by police officers. This next one is titled Eyes. In the summer of 1981, I was a young and eager cop working out of Portland, Oregon's infamous North Precinct. The often heard refrain on the Portland Police Bureau was, "You screw up, you get sent to North Precinct graveyard shift." Happily, I hadn't messed up, but I was a newbie and working with a senior officer on day shift. Actually, I would have preferred graveyard because it was such a blistering hot summer that year. According to the National Weather Service's historical data, August 8th, the day in question, was a record-breaking 107 degrees. My partner had court, so I was sent out alone with a caution from my old sergeant to watch myself. Ours was a rough beat. Portland's version of a ghetto where violence was as common as the hookers that lined the streets, but as it turned out, my problem wouldn't be any of the usual shots fired, knifings, and felony car stops. Mine would be from, well, I'm still not exactly sure. I told dispatch I was clear and I was immediately sent to meet a complainant that had called in a welfare check, which was typically a one not seen call. This entitled the police knocking on the door, checking neighbors, and, depending on the circumstances, forcing entry into the residence. Usually the person in question was in the hospital or had taken an unannounced vacation. Sometimes the person had died alone inside their home. I was hoping it wouldn't be the latter, especially on such an oppressively hot day. The house was in a seedy neighborhood, and I recognized it from a previous contact several months earlier, in which I had warned the middle-aged man about his car's expired plates. He was a Vietnam War vet. Having served in the early years of the long conflict, he said he was struggling with his faith and spirituality, and he had told me a little bit about the Benai Burith stickers covering his bumper. As a vet, I had a soft spot for others that had served, so I gave him a warning to get his licensing squared away. A grim-faced mailman met me on the sidewalk, and I asked him the usual who, what, and when questions. Though the overgrown lawn, full mailbox, and the accumulation of daily newspapers made it clear how to proceed, the mailman walked with me around the old large house. As far as police calls go, it was a no big deal situation, but I remember feeling somehow grateful he was with me. He was a talker, giddily chatting about everything and nothing, no doubt thrilled by a little departure from his routine letter delivery. We stopped at what appeared to be the kitchen window. On the inside, several large black flies flitted along the dirty sill. I knew what that meant. Over the mailman's constant chit-chat, I tried to decipher all the heavy radio traffic on my portable to see if any of the neighboring beat cars might be available to assist. Finally, I asked dispatch, and I was told that every North Precinct car was tied up, as was East Precinct's. Even supervisors were taking calls. I was on my own. The back porch was enclosed, its vehicle door secured by an old-fashioned hook and eye latch. I retrieved my shotgun from my car, returned to the back porch, and easily undid the lock. All the while, the enthralled mailman watched from a distance. He remained outside as I moved through the dark doorway. I don't know what I expected. As I stepped just inside the door to the kitchen, a dead body maybe, bloody carnage, signs of a burglary, but what I could see from where I stood, there was none of that. It was only an empty kitchen, but not for long. One of the largest dogs I have ever seen before or since stepped into the kitchen through the far doorway. The muscle-dense beast, black and gray and unkempt, neither growled nor postured. He just stared at me, stared into my eyes so intently, so profoundly that it chilled me despite the intensity of the heat of the closed house. I know now that it was an Irish wolfhound, one of the tallest of dogs, even towering over Great Danes. A dumb animal he was not. Those unblinking eyes exuded intelligence and something else. Even today I cannot put into words what that something was, other than to say I could see in them a presence of what I didn't know then and I don't know now, but those eyes and what were in them burned into my mind. No way did I want to force an encounter with the great dog, so I asked dispatch to have an animal control officer come to the house and get him. The mailman stuck it out just long enough to see the wolfhound extracted from the place of witnesses. What I had told him as it is said, about to burn me with the intensity of its eyes. With the dog finally gone, as well as the mailman, and still no backup available for me, I chambered around into my shotgun, announced my presence, and re-entered the hot kitchen. This time I went further in than I had before the strange dog had stopped me, but I had gone only a few steps before a dreadful scene stopped me again. It wasn't another great beast, but rather a massive pool of coagulated blood that spread into an empty dining room. I turned down my radio so as not to announce my movements and began to stealthily follow the blood trail, which led me into a bedroom where I found yet another large pool. The blood was on a wall too, splashed crimson nearly as high as my shoulders. Next to it, an open door. I moved toward it, paused to listen, and then peered around the door facing into the small bathroom. The blood trail continued across the floor and disappeared through another doorway into what looked like another bedroom. Tourism make cops nervous. Much time is spent in the police academy and in ongoing training, learning the safest ways to go through a door, where on the other side are often surprises, some dangerous, some deadly. We learned to go in as a team with well-trained strategy and tactics, but I was little more than a rookie, and I was by myself. The big house and its rooms were thick with heavy heat, stench, and filth, but my senses shut all those things out of my mind, leaving only the two most needed at the moment: my ears and my eyes, both functioning at 110%. I moved quickly through the bathroom, stopped at the door, facing to listen, and then a quick peek around the bathroom door into the semi-dark bedroom. The blood trail led across a floor to a rancid, disgusting mattress. On it, the body of the old Navy veteran sprawled naked on his back, his mouth agape in an expression of horror, his open, dead eyes beginning to putrefy. I looked down at his neck, and I immediately wished I hadn't. His throat was mostly gone, ripped and torn apart as if by some ghoulish fiend. A yawning opening of red shredded meat and white was all that remained of what was once his throat and spine. As horrific as that was, it was his eyes. I might have thought at that moment, at least for an instant, about the eyes being a window to the soul and all that, but there was something else about them that chilled my thoughts. It was as if his eyes had looked through a portal and saw something dark and dangerous, as if they had seen hell and its tortured beings. My trainings overrode those thoughts long enough to continue clearing the house. Then, not entirely certain of what I had seen, I returned to the bedroom and the obscene spectacle on the bed. When I could no longer look upon the terrible sight, I lifted my eyes to the wall behind the bed, and a framed testament from Benai Barith started to read it when I felt a very real sensation of being watched. No, not watched, studied. This was followed by an extremely heavy, dark, and oppressive energy pushing down on me. It was as if the room itself was drawing breath to assist the crushing weight. So intense was the sensation that I felt compelled to leave not just the room, but the entire house, and order the medical examiner from outside, away from what had occurred inside the walls. When the ME showed up, I had to go back in and escort him through the dreadful scene. He told me the dog had savaged the man's throat to seek moisture in the awful heat of the closed house. The large blood pools were a result of how the man chose to take his life. The can of Drano he ingested had literally burned out his digestive tract and internal organs. No crime had been committed, the ME confirmed, and then left. I'm having a busy day, he said, no doubt the result of the 107 degrees. I would have many other suicides during my long police career, but the accusation in those two sets of eyes, the man's and the dog's, have remained with me to this day. I understand that our minds are a powerful organ, and that it's possible I underwent some sort of transference of stress so common to war veterans that are expected to hide or completely bury their emotions, but the intrusive memories and mental images that would appear seemingly from nowhere, the vivid recall of the dog, the man, and the blood, perhaps triggered by something, will not leave me. They are infrequent now, and I have put them to rest. I realize they are probably just the result of an accumulation of events over a long career. As a street cop and a long-time member of SWAT, I faced a lot of evil during my career, but nothing like what I experienced weighing me down in that house. I'm not deeply religious, but I do have a sense of spirituality, the closer you get to Lake Erie. I was patrolling a part of an area that is busy in the summer months with boaters and tourists, but it's desolate in the deathly white of winter. One night I was carefully driving through a snowstorm on a road that leads down to the lake. That's when I saw a man walking down the road ahead of me, dressed in a suit and a fedora, the kind of hat men wore in the 1940s. Wrapped around him a coarse gray blanket. He walked with a purpose, as if he had somewhere to go. It was 20 degrees out, snowing hard, and the man was walking on a road where no one should be. The guy had to be mentally ill to be dressed like that in such horrific weather. In the middle of nowhere, I notified dispatch that I was going to make contact with the guy. I rolled up on him and positioned my car so he was next to my right front fender. At this distance, I could clearly see every detail of his clothing, the rough texture of his blanket, and that 70-year-old hat. I looked down to switch on my alley lights, and when I looked back up, he was gone. Thinking he had fallen down, I got out of my car and hurried around to the other side. There was no sign of him. It was snowing, so there had to be footprints. There were none. Given the terrible weather, it was now a possible rescue mission. So I called for another officer to assist. We thoroughly looked everywhere, but we came up with nothing. No guy, no tracks, nothing. I got teased a bit at the end of my shift because I had wasted a good amount of time looking for a man who wasn't there, but I remained puzzled. I had seen him as plain as day, and then he vanished. At one point, a senior officer pulled me aside and told me something I didn't know. That road, he said, is notorious for paranormal activity. In fact, not many officers will drive down it after dark. Apparently, beginning in the 1940s to the 1960s, the mob used to dump bodies down there because it was the nearest unpopulated area from Detroit. It was also common for them to wrap body in a rug or blanket. A retired officer told me that one time he was parked in a lot next to the infamous road where he saw a horse-drawn wagon go by. When the officer turned onto the road, it was gone, and this happened in the middle of the day. I've always thought ghosts were supposed to be blurry and transparent. The man I saw was so clear I could see every detail of him. Either way, that's the only one I ever want to see. This next story is titled Dead Man's Cane. Spirits communicate to everyone all the time, but most people are too busy to notice. That's a quote by a medium. The average snowfall of Roanoke, Virginia is 20 inches, and it can get bitterly cold. Such was the case in the winter of 1985. On the day it happened, gray-laden skies had dumped about 18 inches on us, and besides the usual closures, the city parks had been shut down for several days. While everyone else huddled around the furnaces in their homes, cops were out in the storm. David Ragland was my partner. We were cruising through the parks looking for anyone that might be vandalizing and stealing, as thugs are apt to do when they think they are free to act out in adverse weather. One park we checked was especially remote, and we had to plow our way through the snow to the restroom building. These structures are particularly attractive to copper thieves that go after pipes and fixtures to sell. As we neared the building, we both heard a loud, metallic bang. 10 seconds passed. The silence was especially profound, with everything under a heavy blanket of freshly fallen snow. Bang! There it was again. Suspecting we had rolled up on copper thieves, we got out of our unit and approached the restroom on foot. Bang! Bang! We moved to the door and listened. Bang! We pushed through the door, ready to confront the thieves. David scanned right, and I looked left, and then our eyes fell on the only person in the deep freeze-like room. Perceptions. He was an older man, lying on the floor next to the sink, in his hand a walking cane, just above him a series of metal pipes attached to the wall. The man was quite dead. The banging had stopped. We didn't know when he had died or why, but our guess was he had froze to death. We called the medical examiner, and while we waited, we checked around outside. There were no other footprints in the fresh snow. Later, the medical examiner told us the man had been intoxicated and dead at least 24 hours. The cause of death was official. He had frozen. If it hadn't been for the banging of the pipes, he wouldn't have been found until days later, when the snow had melted and people, children, were once again out and about. We never heard the banging again, and we never found a logical reason for it other than the cane the dead man clutched in his hand over a dark blue Nissan pickup with an unknown plate driving erratically on SR1 highway at speeds of over 85 miles per hour. Apparently, information was being relayed to dispatch from a motorist trying to keep up with it. I was just north of the truck and in a perfect location to watch for it, but I was no sooner in position than dispatch said the pickup was speeding by an overpass north of where I was. I quickly merged my patrol vehicle onto SR1 and floored it to catch up. Dispatch updated, saying the driver of the truck was still over the lanes and using the shoulders to pass other vehicles. Just as I was gaining ground on him, a huge cloud of dust and debris erupted out of me on the right shoulder. I was in the far left lane, so I pulled to the side into the gravel and anchored it. I goosed my patrol unit forwards until there was an opening for me to safely get across the busy lanes to the other shoulder. The smoke and dust had cleared enough to see the Nissan had center punched a tree head on so hard the thick trunk was embedded about 5 feet into the engine bay. The airbags hadn't deployed, leaving the driver slumped unconscious over the steering wheel. I shouted at dispatch to send fire and an ambulance. I probably sounded panicky, but I had never seen a collision so bad. I reached to the driver's window and touched the man's shoulder, knowing he was in bad shape and maybe dead. "Hey, wake up," I called him. No response. "Hey, come on, wake up." Still nothing. Someone ran up to help, and because it was impossible to extract the driver right then, I asked him to hold the injured man's head immobile so I could do CPR where he's at. But the more I saw what had happened to him, the steering wheel was embedded into his chest and his legs were completely crushed. I knew he was dead, but I still had to try. Each time I compressed his chest, it felt like pushing it into a bowl of mush. With each repetition, blood gushed from his nose. Ambulance and fire had yet to arrive, so I continued, though I knew it was useless. When paramedics finally got there, the man was declared dead. It was an eerie feeling seeing a dead body for the first time, let alone doing CPR on the man. My sergeant showed up and told me to work traffic control while he took photos. I slipped on my reflective vest, set up a cone flare pattern, and begun waving through people around the scene. As was always the case, some were obeying me, and others were slowing to rubberneck the crash truck. In the flashing emergency lights from the ambulance, fire rigs, and other police cars, I was guiding traffic with my left hand while holding my right along my hip. I would never have given any thought to the seemingly unimportant detail if it hadn't been for what happened right then. Someone took hold of my right hand. My first thought was another officer wanted to show me something or had a job for me to do, but why would he take my hand instead of my arm? I turned to see what he wanted. There was no one there. There was no one within 30 feet of me. I remember feeling chills crawl down my spine. I still get them just thinking about it. It's hard to explain, but I suddenly felt really cold. I had never experienced